Cyril Ramaphosa ending today's Imbizo after hours of engagements with the community of Ekurhuleni. President Ramaphosa defending the Imbizo concept, saying people look down on Imbizo, saying they are a waste of time, a waste of money. He reckons the expenses are warranted, but also that there's a lot of organization that has to go to these Imbizos. He did poke a bit of fun to protesters who went there. Of course, we will, in a moment, remind you of some of the things that people raised, but also some of the promises that were made. We'll bring you a bit of analysis as well, but we'll also, of course, bring you stories that have been happening around the country today. Let's now bring you that analysis first, and I am joined right now by Professor André Duvenhage, who is a political analyst. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. I'm going to kick off with something that the president himself said when he was making his closing remarks, which stuck with me. He says, we must not wait for imbizos to hear people's concerns.
Indeed. Good afternoon, Mvoyo and the viewers. I think when we talk about a participatory democracy, and people will sometimes like to define our democracy not only as representative, but participatory, then it is your job not to wait for Imbizo, but to act in a direct way through the channels available to the politicians and present your case. But at the same time, it is also true that we know the state has faced major difficulties delivering services, creating order and stability. So the challenges are very, very high. And I am looking at these Imbizos as an attempt from the side of the ANC and the Government of National Unity to connect and reconnect to the people of South Africa.
Yeah, Prof, I mean, back when this Imbizo concept was, I mean, when the government came up with this concept, and I remember, I mean, as a working journalist at the time, gave us a lot of stories. And of course, I mean, it was something that hadn't been done before. And everyone spoke so well of it. It was really embraced as a very unique concept where the people, I mean, the government goes to the people, listens to what they say, and often you would get responses on the spot, and so on, all the good things that were said at the time about it. But I was reading earlier the work of some academics who were talking about how over time, you know, it has become, as one of them put it, a bit vulgarized in the sense that politicians go there without having answers to the questions that people are asking, or go there to merely defend themselves. And some of the other things were raised with that there is never feedback. In other words, where promises would have been made that will come back and tell you how we would have dealt with you, I mean, the challenges you would have identified, and so on and so forth, and that never happens.
Mvoyo, yes, I agree 100% with your analysis. Let's look at the concept of Imbizo. It is basically a Zulu concept where the king is talking to its subjects, listening to the people at the grassroots level, hearing them out about the issues that are facing them. That is the concept and the context. But we have seen this concept being applied in a South African context. And in fact, I was part of a so-called Imbizo, which was an outreach to the Afrikaner community held in, I think it was Orlando, Soweto. And I remember Gwedi Montash taking notes If I must tell you, he wrote on 50 pages, it's probably an understatement, it's close to 100 pages. The problem, however, is nothing came from it. And I believe that is the problem between the current government and the citizens. They do not believe that the government is able or has the political will to address these major challenges. And when we talk about challenges, and we have listened to a number of them this afternoon, you can relate them directly to the political context, the context of the state and the capacity of the state, but you can also relate them to economic conditions, lack of growth, and also social conditions, high levels of unemployment, just to mention a few. And what is needed at the moment is a government that listen to the people, but go more than listen. They will go the way of addressing these problems in a constructive way. And that is my big concern at the moment. And I am prepared to predict that this is going to be the survival of the government of national unity, the ability to deliver according to what the people need at the moment.
And that, Prof, goes to the heart of it all. I mean, you're talking about 100 pages that Gwede Mandashe, compiled in just one Imbizo with one section of the populace. Now, think of the Imbizos that have taken place over the past year, including those 4 that cost 44 million. Think of Imbizos that have taken place over the past 30 years almost. Isn't it a travesty, the fact that 30 years down the line, you have South Africans pretty much raising the same issues over and over again: unemployment, housing, poverty, crime. It's the same things, really.
Yes, indeed, Mavoyo, that is the case. And now the question is, how do we go forward? And my take on the process is that the government of national unity, or let's say the leadership in the post-2024 election environment, need a new paradigm for South African politics, a paradigm that can address the major issues. And you mentioned a number of them, but I just would like to touch on a few. For me, the single most important one is not economic growth. It is the ability to create order, stability, and security. In other words, to restore the state as state. That should be priority number 1. Then from that point of departure, you can address the economy, because in a stable environment, you can get people to invest in your economy. But then we also need to deregulate. We need to make it easy for people to invest in the country. Thirdly, we need to address the huge unemployment rate. And we must take as point of departure, the state is not an institution that can create jobs. The state can create and facilitate an environment that will make it possible for other institutions to create jobs. And the government shouldn't work directly to citizens. They should work through civil society and interact with civil society on that level. Hopefully, some of these things can be addressed when it comes to the national forum that Mr. Ramaphosa is talking about, which is basically a reformed CODESA, where a number of interest groups, politicians, people of the corporate sector, the civil society at large, the churches, etc., can interact, address these problems, and come up with solutions. So in many ways, It should be a bottom-up strategy. And that is what I think the way forward should be.
Late last year, after one Imbizo, the president said that they were going to start with a comprehensive review, as he called it, of the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act of 2005. And this framework aims to ensure that, you know, the different spheres of government work together smoothly, but in a much better way than has been the case up until now. And we saw today civil society, which you spoke about just now. We saw the mayor and the councillors of Ekurhuleni. We saw the provincial cabinet led by Panyaza Lesufi. We saw the president and all his ministers on stage. But I guess, as you said right at the beginning, without political will, none of the things you've just spoken about would ever be done.
Mvoyo, you're 100% right. The problem, there is problems with intergovernmental relations. But the problem is not on the level necessary of legislation. It is probably a result of too much legislation or a lack of implementation of proper legislation. Now, in the political environment we are in, and now I'm specifically referring to the ANC government, they believe if they address a problem and they formulate a legislative proposal or a law or whatever you would like to call it, that is the solution to the problem. But that is only creating the framework for addressing the problems. And this is not happening. And the same is applicable to intergovernmental relations at the moment. And one of the big challenging factors, that is a relative new one, but not 100% new, is coalition politics and the alignment of coalitions. Let me give you an example. We have a coalition on a national level involving 10 parties, with the main parties, the ANC and the DA. But if we look at what is going on in Gauteng, it's a completely different makeup, excluding the DA. And at the moment, there are processes going on in both Joburg Metro, but also in Tsakane, to see if they can consolidate the ANC's position going against the general principles that facilitate the government of national unity. So that's one of the big new challenges.
Prof, that's where we're going to leave you. Thanks very much for your time and insights, Professor André Duvenhage.